Yasodanandana Pradajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Pradajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna. So now we're going to receive some transcendental wisdom from Krishna, from the Bhagavad Gita, which I think most of you are familiar with. So we're going to read from the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. This is text number 29. And this chapter is called Knowledge of the Absolute. Jaramara moksaya mam āśritya yatantitye te brahma tad vidhu Kṛṣṇam ajatmakam karma chakilam. Krishna says, intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. Commentary. Birth, death, old age, and diseases affect this material body, but not the spiritual body. There is no birth, death, old age, and disease for the spiritual body. So one who attains a spiritual body becomes one of the associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engages in eternal devotional service, is really liberated. Aham Brahmasmi. I am spirit. It is said that one should understand that he is Brahman, spirit soul. This Brahman conception of life is also in devotional service, as described in this verse. The pure devotees are transcendentally situated on the Brahman platform, and they know everything about transcendental activities. 4 kinds of impure devotees who engage themselves in the transcendental service of the Lord achieve their respective goals. And by the grace of the Supreme Lord, when they are fully Krishna conscious, they actually enjoy a spiritual association with the Supreme Lord. But those who are worshippers of the demigods never reach the Supreme Lord in His supreme planet. Even the less intelligent Brahman-realized persons cannot reach the supreme planet of Krishna known as Goloka Vṛndāvana. Only persons who perform activities in Krishna consciousness, mam āśritya, are actually entitled to be called Brahman, because they are actually endeavoring to reach the Krishna planet. Such persons have no misgivings about Krishna, and thus they are factually Brahman. Those who are engaged in worshipping the form of or archa of the Lord, or who are engaged in meditation on the Lord simply for liberation from material bondage, also know, by the grace of the Lord, the purports of Brahman, Adi Bhuta, etc., as explained by the Lord in the next chapter. Omegyana tamarandasya gyananjana salakaya chakshrum militam jena tasmai Sri Gurave namaha mukham krotava chalang pangunang hayate karim yat kripa taraham vande shigarum nidataranam vanchakalpatubhyasya kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Krishna has given us some good news here, that if one endeavors for liberation from old age and death, they can take to devotional service. This is actually the goal of the human form of life. Service is something that goes on all over the world, just like now the presidential election is coming up. And basically all the candidates are saying, I'll be the best servant of this country, vote for me, basically. But actually the perfection of service is to serve Krishna. We're all spirit souls in material bodies. And it's actually unnatural for the soul to be in a material body. Actually, Prabhupada, he said that the soul is embarrassed to be in the material body, because the nature of the soul is eternality, knowledge, and bliss. This is the nature of the soul. But we're in these bodies that are temporary, so much ignorance, and there's a lot of suffering. So an intelligent person will try to figure out how to get out of this situation, as Prabhupada mentions here in the first verse of the commentary, that we have problems: birth, death, old age, and disease. These are the problems. But we can overcome them. This is the good news, the evening good news. We can overcome these problems. But the first thing we have to understand is that we're not these bodies. We're the soul within. Nainam chindanti sastrani, nainam dehati pavaka, na chainam karyanchav, no sojiti marata. That the soul is so extraordinary, it's so amazing, that it can't be destroyed by any weapon. Now, what is the most powerful weapon now in the world? Huh? Who knows? Nuclear bomb. Nuclear bomb can't kill the soul. Even a lot of them, even 100 of them can't kill the soul. It's not material. It can't be destroyed by any weapon. It can't be burnt by fire. Practically everything can be burned by fire, but not the soul. Can't be withered by the wind. It can't be moistened by water. You can't drown the soul. So it's very powerful. So why is the soul so powerful? Because it's part of Krishna, the supreme power, most powerful, Krishna. So the nature of the soul is it's eternal. Very important to understand. I was distributing books one time in Ireland, and I was distributing books with a friend of mine, and he was speaking to one lady, trying to convince her to take a book, so that she could understand more about herself, about the soul, about God. She was a little hesitant. And finally she said to my friend, if I take this book, my husband is going to kill me. So I just kind of stuck my head in the conversation. I said, he can't kill you. You're eternal. And then stepped out of the conversation. And then later my friend came to me and said, "That's a good thing you said that, because her daughter had died just a couple years earlier. And when I said that, she said to my friend, 'You mean my daughter's not dead? She's still alive?' I said, 'Yeah, she doesn't die, the soul's eternal.' And she felt so much relief. Because you don't hear that. You have the whole educational system, but you never hear it. You never get that education that we're an eternal soul. So she had never thought of that. So she's very happy. And she bought the book, learn more about the soul, learn more about God. So this is important that we understand this, the nature of the soul. Just like I have these glasses on. I'm seeing through the glasses, right? The glasses aren't seeing, I'm seeing through the glasses. You take it a step further, my eyes aren't seeing. It's the soul seeing through the eyes. Because if I, the soul, was not in this body, I wouldn't be able to see through these eyes. Right? Yeah. Because dead bodies don't see. Right? I'm alive. I appear to be alive in this body because I, the soul, am in it. Therefore, I'm able to speak, I'm able to see, I'm able to hear, because the soul is there. So this is the reality. We're the soul within. 100%. We're the soul within. We're not the body. Just like today is my birthday. But is it actually my birthday? Because as we're hearing here, we don't take birth. We don't die. There is no birth for the soul. It's eternal. It's always existed. It's kind of inconceivable because we're seeing that everything, there's a beginning and there's an end. That's what we see. We see a beginning and an end. Houses, cars, people, so many things, buildings, there's a beginning, there's an end. But not with the soul. Not with God. There's no beginning and end. There's always been. So there is no birth for the soul. There's no death for the soul. It's nice to know. We can't die. But the goal of the human form of life is to live in spiritual life. Just like some of you may have heard that we're humans having a spiritual experience. Anybody ever hear that? Human beings having a spiritual, that's not true. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Yeah. This human body, this is temporary. But we're the eternal soul. We're spirit souls having a human experience. And we've had many experiences in different bodies. But the human form is a very special, it's a special form of life where we could understand the absolute truth. Therefore there's a statement, Nirdeham adyang sulabhang sudurlabham, plabham sukapam guru karanaram. That this human form is like a boat that can help us cross over the ocean of birth and death. It's called samsara. The soul is going through different varieties of bodies. Yeah. It's like wherever you see life, just like you see a bird flying, there's life in that bird. Where is the life coming from? It's coming from the soul. You see a tree, it's green. There's a soul in there, that's why it's green. And when it turns brown, the soul is left. Yeah. You see a dog, man's best friend. There's a soul there. And they have personalities. I remember when I was a child, practically the first misery I ever experienced in this material world was when my little puppy was killed. It was devastating. I was about 5 years old. I didn't know what death was until then, but it was pretty horrific. So the puppy was alive. We had a nice relationship. Wherever I would go, he would go. And we had a very bonding relationship. But then he left. What is this? I asked my mother, what is this? What happened? It's death. Oh, I don't like that. So, this human form of life is a boat by which you can cross over this vast ocean of material existence. And there's a spiritual master. He's the captain of the boat. Just like if someone wants to learn anything, especially if something that takes some skill, you got to have a teacher. Just like we have universities. People are learning so many skills in universities. So the spiritual master, he teaches how to engage in devotional service, how to realize that one is the soul within, how to act for God, for Krishna. It's not an easy thing. So the spiritual master, he knows how to act for God. He knows how to act and how not to act. There's some things we should do and other things we shouldn't do. Do's and don'ts. So the spiritual master, he gives this guidance. So you have the boat, you have the captain of the boat. Now this example was given many, many thousands of years ago when there was no boats with engines. So this is an example of a boat with no engine. So if you have a boat out in the middle of the ocean and you have a captain, but you don't have an engine and you have no wind, where is the boat going to go? Nowhere. That's right. It's going nowhere. So the wind is the favorable winds is the Vedic literatures. The Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, so many nice Vedic literatures that give us guidance in the favorable winds. So these things help us to cross over the ocean of material existence. Actually, the Bhagavad Gita, it's an instruction guide for the human form of life. And therefore, throughout the world, it's appreciated and relished, actually. I distribute these books all over the world. And it's very common for people to say, oh yeah, I have Bhagavad Gita. It's very common. That's the main reason I distribute it, because it's very famous. Also, a lot of people have it, but I show the Bhagavad Gita as it is. There's a lot of Bhagavad Gitas out there, hundreds of them translated into English. But the Bhagavad Gita as it is commented by Srila Prabhupada, who actually lived the teachings his whole life. So he's a very good captain that we can take guidance from. His commentaries are magnificent. See, this is timeless wisdom. You could read it over and over and over and over again, and it doesn't get old. That's the nature of spiritual wisdom. And you even get more out of it. You get more enhancement, more purification, because each time you read it, you're on another level. And sometimes you read it and like, hey, I don't remember reading that. So, the Bhagavad Gita helps us to understand our nature, the nature of Krishna, and that there's another world. It's called Sanatan. The soul is Sanatan, it's eternal. Krishna, he's also Sanatan, he's eternal. And there's a world beyond this world, the spiritual world, which is also Sanatan. So the goal of life is to come together. For the soul, the Sanatan soul, to connect with the Sanatan person, Krishna, and the Sanatan world, the spiritual world. This is called yoga, connection. This is where this actually the meaning of yoga is connection. Connection with the soul, with the Supreme Soul, Krishna. And this is actually the happiness of the soul. This is not our natural atmosphere here. Our natural atmosphere is in the spiritual world. Just like if you try to put a fish in some house, some big mansion, you got a nice Mercedes-Benz outside the house, fish is not going to be happy. When's the fish going to be happy? When it goes back into the water. So the main disease in the world right now, does anybody know? Stress. Stress. It's the main disease. From so many other diseases comes stress. Because we're not in our natural atmosphere. Natural atmosphere is in the spiritual world, where one is serving Krishna, happily serving Krishna. Not here serving the senses. We're not going to be satisfied by serving the mind and senses. Because we're not the mind and senses. Krishna says, Evam Buddhe Parang Buddha Samsum Dhyatmanamatmana. Knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, one should carefully engage in Krishna consciousness and slay this formidable enemy known as material desires. See, there's material desires and there's spiritual desires. Material desires are those desires that keep us bound in the material world. And spiritual desires, they liberate us from this material world. They liberate us from this material bondage. So it's not natural for the soul to be in a situation where it is forced out of a material body. It's natural to have a spiritual body. In the spiritual world, everybody has a spiritual body. Doesn't get old, doesn't get disease. There's no birth, no old age, no anxiety. It's called Vaikuntha. That's the spiritual world. Can I get a cup of water? I'm going to need some. Govardhan. So, we don't want to die. Like there was one person, some of you may know, this person named Jack LaLanne. Anybody? Some of us old guys? Jack LaLanne, he taught physical endurance and physical education on TV, very famous. And he once said, I'm not going to die. It'd ruin my reputation. He was in good health, but he did die after he said that. Yeah, he was 96 years old when he died, that's right. Good. He was good health. He died of cancer?
Yes. Extremely fit, all the way into his 90s, and he died of cancer.
Yeah. So there was one person, Yudhisthira, who was asked, what is the most amazing thing? And he said the most amazing thing is that although people are dying, grandfathers are dying, grandmothers are dying, people are dying all over, people are thinking, but I won't die. The most amazing thing. People are thinking. Not everybody, but most people are thinking, I won't die. And therefore they're living their life as though they won't die. There was another person named Parikshit Maharaj who found out that he's going to die in 7 days. So he was very intelligent. So he went to a saintly person to hear, what is the goal of life? I'm going to die soon. Please tell me, what should I do? What is the best thing I can do? They're very intelligent. Here in America, if someone finds out that they're going to die, what do? They take them to Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, take them to the zoo. Live it up while you can. You're going soon. Not very intelligent. So he wanted to know, what is the goal of life? And he found out from this very saintly person, what is the goal of life? And he heard for 7 days, he heard from this saintly person, what is the goal of life? And the goal is to hear about Krishna. To hear about Krishna and to chant about Krishna, to remember Krishna. Shravanam kirtanam vishnu smaranam pada sevanam archanam vandanam dasyam sakyam atmanavedanam. I see these are the 3 most important things. People are hearing about so many things. Just like tonight, there's millions and millions of people listening to the news, the evening news. Right? And what is the news, the evening news? It's all bad news. Right? Nobody's inspired, enthused by the evening news. In Brazil, there was one radio station, it was called the Good News Channel. It was just good news. Can you imagine that? Just good news. But then after 6 months they had to stop because they ran out of good news. But you never run out of bad news, right? Never run out of bad news. It's the material world. It's the material world. There's so much bad news. So Krishna comes and gives us the Bhagavad Gita. It's all good news. It's all good news. We have Bhagavad Gita here, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, given by Dravida Prabhu, who gives the good evening news right here in the temple on those evenings. We have, of course, we on Sunday here as well. So yes, Krishna comes to let us know that there's another place which is much, much nicer than this place. Yeah. And it's possible. It's possible to go to this place. You know, this human form of life is actually it's a preparation. It's a preparation for the final exam. We're preparing for that moment when we leave this body. See, us monks, we don't say when someone dies. You know, we say when you leave the body. Because the soul is just leaving the body. No, there's no death for the soul. Just like we're all in this room right here. And when we leave this room, we don't die. Right? So this body is like a room. And when we, the soul, leave this room, this body, Krishna's like kshetra. Kshetra means a field of activities. When the soul leaves this room or this kshetra, this field of activities, we don't die. It's just a soul leaving a room to another destination. So, just like a friend of mine left his body about a week ago, a very nice devotee. So he left his body, he went somewhere else. And if he's thinking of Krishna, if we think of Krishna at the time of death, then we go back. We go back to the spiritual world. And therefore, a devotee will think of Krishna as much as he can, so that at the time of death, when the soul leaves the body, we're thinking of Krishna, then we go back to Krishna. And this birth, death, old age, and disease, finished. We go back home. Back home, back to the spiritual world. It's not an easy thing, because the mind has so many desires, so many material desires they want to fulfill. But we're spirit, we're not matter. These material things won't satisfy the soul. They won't satisfy the soul, just like the fish out of water won't be satisfied. So all these material things, they won't satisfy the soul. But connection to Krishna will satisfy the soul, because we're spirit. We're not matter. And when we fully realize this, that's a big step. To realize that we're the soul within, that's a big step in our journey back home. And by hearing the Bhagavad Gita, we get this purification. I have some more good news for you. There's a statement in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Harinama, 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 eva kevalam. Kalo nasteva 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 gachar anyata. That in this age of Kali, the process for getting purified is to chant the names of Krishna. Because Krishna and his name are non-different. Kind of inconceivable that the name of God and God are non-different. Not easy to understand. I was speaking to one person at a Sunday feast also when I was in Germany many years ago. And this guest said, I find this to be inconceivable that the name of God and God are identical. So I said, well, you have to be a little patient to understand this. And this guest said, this word patient, it's not even in my dictionary. Generally in the West, we're very impatient. We want everything now. Now. No, but we have to be patient. This is one of the qualities of a devotee, patience. So we try our best, and Krishna, he will help. And there's a statement that utsaha, that one has to be enthusiastic. Enthusiastic to understand the truth. Enthusiastic to serve Krishna. And then Krishna sees that enthusiasm and he reciprocates with us. The more enthusiastic we are, the more Krishna reveals himself. Bhavagrahi Janardhan, that he's interested in seeing the intention. What is our intention? What is it we want? Generally people have some hidden desires. Even people come to religion, there's some hidden desires. They want God to give us some opulence, to give us some material thing. But what will actually satisfy the soul is when we have no selfish desire, no desire other than to serve Krishna, no selfish desire, just completely selfless. This is how they are in the spiritual world. Everybody is selfless. There's a sign before you enter the spiritual world, no selfish people allowed. So we got to learn to be selfless. Generally in this world, people are selfish. So the more we connect to Krishna, the more we associate with devotees, we also become selfless and qualify ourselves to go back to the spiritual world, where it's, as Prabhupada would say, beyond birth and death. You have to go beyond birth and death to our eternal nature. And there's one aphorism, Mrito ma amrita gama. Go to that place where there is no death. Don't stay in this place where there's so much death. It's unnatural. It's unnatural for us to be in this place. See? Confirmed by the child. So maybe I'll leave a little time if you have any questions or a comment that anybody would like to have. Yes.
I have a question. Like, when at the time of the death, person is so unconscious, and he don't know nothing. That's what I think. That's what I saw recently. And then how he can chat and think about Krishna? What is the process?
Okay. So the question is, if someone at the time of death, they're unconscious?
Yeah, and don't know nothing,
Doesn't know anything about Krishna, doesn't...
No, doesn't know, no senses. Like he's senseless, like Beho.
He's in a coma. He's in a coma.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So I have the question. Thank you. So what do you do in a situation where someone knows about Krishna, but they're in a coma? That's a very, very, very unfortunate situation to be in, because one can't chant, can't think of Krishna. So, but Krishna sees what they've done throughout their life, and Krishna sees, and he reciprocates accordingly. So if they've been serving Krishna throughout their life, they may not go back to Godhead because they're in that situation where they can't think of Krishna, they can't chant the name of Krishna. But Krishna sees what they've done, and he helps them on in their journey, in their next life. Yeah. So have no fear. Krishna's taking care. He takes care. He's very kind. Thank you for the question. Yes, we have a question back here. My dear friend from Brazil. Como vai? Tudo bem?
Very good. Thanks for sharing about the radio station in Brazil. For a moment, I was so proud to be a Brazilian because we had the Good News Radio, and then and then my hype was over when you said they closed down after 6 months because they ran out of good news. But yeah, my question today would be. You were mentioning that the body leaves the material world and goes to the spiritual world. What about those people who claims to have been to the spiritual world? They were dead, pronounced dead for like minutes, sometimes hours, and then they come back and they share a story about what they saw when they were gone.
Yeah, I've seen some of these things on YouTube. You have to be careful about these things because sometimes it's just they're trying to promote their religion. They come up with some story, to increase the faith of someone who doesn't have that faith. So when we go back to the spiritual world, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that having once gone back to the spiritual world, you never come back again. So that doesn't happen. See, confirmed again, you see? Once we go back to the spiritual world, that's it. You don't come back again and tell people, oh, it's real nice over there. No, that's it. You made it. Yeah. Yes, you give him back.
I met a guy, and he doesn't have like a YouTube channel, and he's a little bit handicapped actually, mentally, because of an accident he had when he was about 10 years old. I think he was snowmobiling, and then he died. And for 27 minutes, he was dead. And he came back to life when he was in the ambulance, and his father was like praying or meditating. So he was specifically asking, oh, give me my son back. Please, I insist. And after 27 minutes, the kid was gone. He came back, but he came back a little bit handicapped. And this handicapped guy, which for me is a really pure soul, because he's handicapped enough, actually.
He's what?
Handicapped.
Handicapped.
Handicapped, okay. Yes, in his brain.
Okay.
How do you say?
Handicapped.
Sounds good. Handicapped.
Handicapped, yeah.
Yes. And then he told me about what he was doing for so many minutes when he was dead. And that's why I asked.
Yeah. So what did he say?
He said he met with ancestors. And
he met with?
Ancestors.
Ancestors, okay.
Thank you. And he was pretty much hanging out with family in a place where he felt like it was heaven, because it was extremely peaceful. And I'm just saying that because it was the reason of my question. And things don't match, and I think it's wonderful because it's a question that maybe it's not fully answered, and that make us to seek even more and make us more hungry for spiritual knowledge. So thanks for the answer.
I'll do my best. Well, some people have a misconception that heaven is the spiritual world. See, there's hell. There's three different levels. There's this material, middle planetary, and then there's heaven, and then beyond heaven there's the spiritual world. That's beyond heaven, the spiritual world, the kingdom of God. Heaven is still in the material world. And as far as his meeting with relatives and ancestors in a peaceful place, that doesn't necessarily mean it was the kingdom of God, you see. So, I mean, there's very nice places that aren't heaven also. Even on this planet, there's very nice places. I mean, this is a pretty nice place right here, you know, this temple here. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that was heaven, even. Even to go to heaven and come back, that's, I mean, I don't know. I've never, I mean, there's many saintly people who do that. They can actually go to heaven and come back, and you hear about in our Vedic literatures of personalities that can do that. You know. You're welcome. Good to see you again. Anything else? Yes.
I have another question. I actually have like 2 questions.
Okay, let's do one at a time.
Just in regards to what he was talking about, and us being soul,
Yeah.
us being spirit and not our body, is it the spiritual world? Okay, so there's Goloka Vṛndāvana, which is obviously the supreme, but then heaven is not considered the spiritual realm, or
No, that's still in the
because
material
it's
world.
material.
Yeah, yeah.
But even here, like the Earth planet, our spirit exists here. Is it not possible that the material world and the spiritual world can be kind of coexisting at the same time?
Well, even in this material world, if we're Krishna conscious, we can be, you know, not of this world. Just like Prabhupada, he used to say that wherever I go, it's Vrindavan. So he was in this world, but he wasn't, just like even Jesus said, be in this world, but not of this world. Mm-hmm. So you could be in this world, but in the spiritual world, if we're thinking of Krishna. But if we're thinking of all kinds of material things, then we're, you know, that keeps us here. But if we're in this world, we're thinking of Krishna, we're serving Krishna, we're not in this world, we're in the spiritual world. And then when we leave the body, we go back to Krishna. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Also, just thinking like, so it's, can't really say a state of mind necessarily, because it's not a state of mind really, because it's more of a state of soul.
Yeah, it's a state of mind. See, that we have our spiritual mind also. Mm-hmm. Here we have our material mind, but the mind gets spiritual. In the spiritual world, they have a mind also, but it's spiritualized. Mm-hmm. So while we're in this world, our mind can become spiritualized. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, spiritual mind. Always thinking of Krishna. That's the
same mind that we have now. Different mind.
But there's the brain. Mm-hmm. It's a muscle, the brain. Mm-hmm. There's the mind is subtle. Mm-hmm. So our material mind can transform into a spiritual mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. My other question was when the Bhagavad Saptaha was spoken, I think you said it was Parikshit Maharaj.
Yeah, yeah.
Who spoke the Bhagavad Saptaha? I can't remember.
That was Sukadev Goswami.
Okay.
So for 7 days, he spoke the truth to Parikshit Maharaj, and after he spoke to Parikshit Maharaj, he went back to Godhead. Yeah. And there was many sages, hundreds and hundreds of saintly people listening to this conversation. So it's very, and we have it, you can read it, actually we have it here, we have the Srimad Bhagavatam. Who here owns the Srimad Bhagavatam? Okay, quite a few. We have the Srimad Bhagavatam. If anybody would like to purchase the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have it here. You can purchase it for a very nominal fee, very priceless wisdom for a small price. It's on sale today. We have, huh? We have right in here, in the gift store, huh? On the table, and we have more, I think, back there. So it's incredible. The Srimad Bhagavatam, it's called the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the postgraduate study of the Bhagavad Gita. It's incredible. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Anything more, student? You have any questions? This is all new to you. Huh? Okay. Yes.
Thank you. So the spirit, and we're not the body.
Yeah.
So if a 3-year-old child versus a 30-year-old adult transitions, where does their soul?
Transition?
Yes, a Passover dies.
The soul leaving the body.
The soul.
Soul transitions to another body.
Transitions to another body.
Leaves the body.
Okay. So you have a 3-year-old, and you have a 30-year-old.
Or versus a 30-year-old. What happens to their soul?
Well, the 30-year-old, it depends if, where the consciousness was. The 3-year-old is not very conscious. He's just trying to figure out what the heck's going on here. So there's not. It's hard for him to understand anything about soul or God or So it's Actually, Prabhupada said up to 5 years old, a child is like practically. I think he said even like an animal, because it's so. Up to 5 is you can't even think properly. But 30 depends on how they've on what they were thinking. See, we're the architects of our future.
Okay.
Depending on what we're thinking, we're creating our yam yam vapi spadambhavam. Krishna says that whatever state of being one remembers when he quits this body, that state he will attain. So we're creating our future by our thoughts and by our actions, mainly by our thoughts. So if that 30-year-old is thinking of Krishna, then back home. But thinking of material things, then they have to stay and continue the called samsara, the cycle of birth and death. So therefore, Krishna is emphatically expressing the importance to think of him. Think of him. Yeah. He says, always think of me. Become my devotee, worship me, offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. So he's thinking of our good. He has our good wishes at heart. So therefore he gives us this knowledge. So we should take advantage of this knowledge and go back home.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we have time for one more question. Does anybody else have a question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
In the verse, the word mokshaya is there, and it's talked about a little bit that we're after moksha. But in Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, as it is, as well as all of his other books, he points to a eternal relationship with Krishna in loving service. But other books and other spiritual leaders of today and bygone ages will describe a different kind of moksha, where you merge and become one with God, or you become you lose your identity and merge and become one with the universe.
Whoa.
So could you explain how Srila Prabhupada's and Krishna's version is superior to this impersonal merging?
Well, I would like to. I mean, that's a whole class in itself. Class is just ending now. But the highest liberation is to be absorbed in Krishna and go back home, back to the spiritual world. That's the goal of life. That's the highest liberation. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.